afternoon, everyone. Please be seated. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Council at the Stadium of Light. Please note that the meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, and I welcome members of the press and the public who may be viewing this meeting remotely. Can we now move into the formal business of the meeting? Can we take the notice convening the meeting as read? Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Mr Mayor, we have apologies from Councillors Leadbitter and G. Smith and Alderman Arnott, Forbes and Tate.
Are there any other apologies? No.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Hodgson.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, Mayor, do you want, if we're at a table, do you want us to stand to speak or just, can we sit?
When they make their speeches, they should go to a mic, but from the table you can speak.
Yeah, you. How many tables have what mics on?
I'm happy either way. I just wanted to clarify what the table mics were for. Martin Haswell is delayed at a work meeting. It's possible he'll arrive very late or not at all, so he may stroll into the meeting and disrupt proceedings. Sorry about that. He asked me to apologise in advance, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay now, thank you. So we'll be standing to the microphones that are near to you when you wish to speak.
Could I say the same, sorry to interrupt, about Councillor Hartnack? He's going to be a little late too. With apologies.
Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the annual meeting of the Council, which was held on the 19th of May 2021. Can we agree the minutes?
Mayor of Sunderland? Would you like me to stand at the table? I'll do that then. Hello.
You can take your mask off, Councillor, if you wish to while you're speaking.
Thank you. I'm still getting used to this, Mayor of Sunderland. With regard to the minutes, can I ask a question on page, excuse me, I should have had it marked, page 10. At the last meeting of the Council, we were advised that we would be notified of the appointment of Deputy Cabinet members at a future date for Children Learning and Skills in Dynamic City. Obviously, this is quite an important issue. I wondered if the leader might be able to clarify whether that would be presented to councillors at this meeting or if it had been decided in the interim. Thank you.
We're just asking, can we agree and record the minutes, Councillor? We're not asking for discussion on the minutes.
Well, fair enough. Can I raise a point of order then, please, Mayor of Sunderland?
Well, he's got to clarify. He needs to clarify what it is. What's the point of order? What is the point of order, Councillor?
Yes, Part 2, Article 7, the executive item 7.06, Deputy Cabinet members. This part of the Constitution outlines the key role and the job descriptions of Cabinet members in this Council. Obviously, it's massively important. The leader has himself reiterated at every opportunity how important it is that there are Deputy Cabinet members. Could he please clarify for the Council whether those Cabinet members will be appointed at this meeting or any time soon? Thank you.
Leader, if you wish to answer that, you don't have to. It is your decision.
Is the mic working?
No, you'll have to go to the one behind you, Councillor Miller.
No, that's fine. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. No determination has yet been made, Councillor Hodgson, about filling the positions of Cabinet deputies. It's an important decision and I will take my time on it. I expect I'll have an answer in September if that is convenient with you.
Thank you. Can we agree the minutes?
No. No, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor?
Mayor, my voting decision is wrong on here. Councillor Dodds. On page 11.
Can we check that? What should your vote be?
It should be against on the first one and for on the second.
Against on the first one and for
On the second. And it's just the wrong way round.
the wrong way around.
Councillor Dodds.
Thank you, we'll note that.
Mr.
But once again, can we agree the minutes?
I apologise, Mr. Mayor. On page 11 of the agenda for this meeting, it says that I voted against the motion put forward by Councillor Mullen on item 9 and for the original motion. As colleagues will attest at the meeting, I did the precise opposite.
We'll note that as well. Before I ask, can we agree the minutes? Is anyone else? Can we agree the minutes? Thank you. Next is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? Just the two. Councillor Miller.
Mr. Mayor, since I sit on the board of the Newcastle International Airport, I'll have to declare it personal and prejudicial for the notice of motion that is the second item in that area and leave the room.
Yeah, okay. The same declaration. Are there any more declarations? Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, to clarification, Councillor Doris Turner, who's here, is mentioned later on in the agenda. Will we still be doing that item?
When we come to that item, I'll be asking the leader if he wishes to take that report out.
So she doesn't need to repair it to...
Yeah, and I'm
the
pleased to see
declaration.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to announcements. Please note, in the event of a fire alarm being sounded, there are no testing planned for this afternoon. Therefore, all instructions to evacuate should be treated as real. Please follow the instructions given by the stadium staff. That is to follow me, let me go first. At the end of the meeting, can I request that you all remain seated until you are given instructions to leave? And I'd like to thank those members who have given notice for their intention to speak. Where notice has been given, the member will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. And if any member who hasn't given prior notice wishes to speak at any point during the meeting, they should raise their hands to indicate and speak when invited to do so. It would also be of assistance if they could state their name. I am mindful of the government's guidance on the mitigating measures which may be applied in respect of safely conducting a council meeting during a pandemic, one of which is keeping meeting times as short as possible. While it is important that the democratic process is able to take place, I would request that members endeavour to conclude the business on the agenda within the allotted 3-hour period. No arrangements have been made for the meeting to reconvene tomorrow, and in the current circumstances, we should seek to avoid having to convene a further meeting to deal with unfinished business. Just before I end the announcement, can I be a little bit cheeky and remind members of a sponsorship form for the Mayor's charity. My wife will be taking part in the walk next weekend, and we do have a sponsorship form, but we will fill it in to save the pandemic and the contact with a pen. I hope you'll agree with me, the worthy causes, and thank you very much for your indulgence. I have no further announcements to make, so we move on to the COVID-19, and I would like now to invite the leader to provide an update to Council on the situation with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity once again to provide an update to Council on the ongoing situation in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we had all hoped this week that we would see the final step in the easing of COVID restrictions, but as we all now know, sadly, this has been delayed. It is incredibly frustrating and disappointing, but the public's health must come first, and all decisions must be guided by the data. Unfortunately, across the North East, we've seen increased transmission within our communities in the past 2 to 3 weeks, and the region's infection rates are now a cause for significant concern. Mr. Mayor, we are seeing that the Delta variant, which spreads more easily, is causing cases to increase, and we are seeing the highest infection rates amongst our younger age groups, so we must all, each and every one of us, continue to play our part in the battle against this dreadful and determined virus. There is no doubt about it that our best protection is to get as many people as possible vaccinated with 2 doses of a vaccine, which have been confirmed to be highly effective, including against the Delta variant. This really will slow the spread of the virus, and we all desperately want to get back to normal. So the plea to people of all ages, from regional leaders and health professionals, is to take up both doses of the jab as soon as you're invited. Vaccinations are now available to everyone over 18, and we're doing all we can to support the NHS to deliver jabs into people's arms as quickly as possible. And we're emphasising that it's of the utmost importance that people keep following the current rules and guidance in relation to hands, face and space, in meeting up with others and in continuing to work from home if at all possible. Put simply, the Delta variant is transmitting at an alarming rate, and what we are saying as leaders is that if we're to keep the North East open and see the remaining restrictions lifted, then we need to draw on our resilience as a community more than ever. We're working with the government on potential measures tailored to the region's needs and circumstances at this point in time, including access to their communication channels and the further localisation of test and trace, Mr. Mayor. And we continue to seek clarity on any extension of national schemes to support our business community and those parts of the economy most affected. As ever, I'm immensely proud of the determination and resilience that's been shown and how the vast majority of people in our city have taken responsibility and done the right thing. And in the face of this latest threat, we need to keep it going and work together to move forward. We've done so well to date in what has been a long, long journey now to keep the city running, to ensure our most vulnerable are supported, and to ensure Sunderland and its people have every chance of recovering from the pandemic in a strong and competitive position. Mr. Mayor, the Council is doing all that it can alongside our partners to ensure progress continues to be made with our ambitious social and economic regeneration plans, and that within the parameters of the restrictions in place to keep us all safe, there is as much as possible to see and do in Sunderland throughout the year. Mr. Mayor and my fellow elected members, I know you join me in being immensely proud of and grateful to our officer team who've gone the extra mile and much, much further over the last 16 months. Our officers have been outstanding public servants, and whilst dealing with the impacts of the pandemic on their own lives and personal circumstances, they've ensured we've done the best job possible for the city and its residents. However, inevitably there has been and continues to be huge pressure on council services and resources, and as ever, I'd really appreciate your support in referencing to the comprehensive information on the Council's COVID web pages in the first instance, and in avoiding any non-essential demands on officers so that they can focus on supporting our residents, businesses and communities, because the Council staff, like everybody else, get COVID. And sometimes our departments are absolutely hamstrung because when one member of the team has to isolate, they take a bundle of people with them. So if we can please bear that in mind, everybody, that would be very helpful. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to bring my update to a close once again with a huge thank you to everyone playing a part in our battle against COVID-19, and a big plea to keep it going, take good care, remain vigilant and follow the rules. As ever, we will continue to communicate with residents and everyone in the city on the latest situation. and keep on updating and sharing information, advice and guidance. And we'll also keep supporting our communities to overcome the challenges the pandemic continues to present, Mr. Mayor. We will keep on forging ahead with our plans to create a fantastic city with opportunities for all our residents. We just need to get through this public health crisis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Do any members wish to speak? No? Can we note the update from the Leader on the COVID issues? Thank you. The next item is the citywide approach to the carbon reduction. I would like to invite the Deputy Leader to present an update to the Council on the citywide approach to carbon reduction. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to update members regarding ongoing progress being made in relation to the Council's goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030 and reducing our carbon emissions. The Council's 2030 task group continues to be very active on initiatives to drive forward carbon reduction and deliver against the Council's action plan. Members will recall the action plan supports delivery of the citywide low carbon framework, which was adopted by partners in December 2020 and endorsed by Cabinet in January. Examples of recent work include the following. I can report to you that through the Green Recovery Challenge Fund from National Lottery, Sunderland, together with South Tyneside, Gateshead, the Durham Wildlife Trust, has been awarded a total of £250,000 funding. Sunderland's portion of funds will be used to upgrade 10 local wildlife sites in the city. Our bid with partners in Tyne and Wear and County Durham to create a new North East Community Forest is progressing well, and a decision is expected by the end of July. In addition, 75 trees were generously donated by the city by Heskel Energy Systems for Earth Day, and we were able to work with Southwick Primary School to plant these trees within the school grounds and also at Southwick Cemetery. We have been awarded £300,000 revenue grant funding from the Government's Capability Fund to promote sustainable transport options through 2021. Through the Department for Transport's Active Travel Fund, Sunderland has been awarded just over £1 million to upgrade the national cycle network along the coast at Roker, subject to the outcome of successful consultation. We are also developing a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan for the city, which will be presented to Cabinet in July. The Government's Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, or OZEV, has also awarded the Council £69,300 of grant funding to date to deliver on-street residential electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. Members may also be aware that a new e-Collect all-electric refuse collection vehicle has now been delivered and began its rounds on the 8th of June. Following a successful application, Sunderland has been selected to be part of a European peer learning programme linked to the Covenant of Mayors. We have been matched with a local authority in both Spain and Italy to share learning and expertise with our citywide approach through development of the low carbon framework, having been identified as a particular strength. We have used research which we commissioned to engage with both residents and business to gain insight into their current understanding and behaviours relating to low carbon best practice, to shape the development of our engagement and communication activity. In terms of our external communications and engagement, we have identified 6 key groups around which to focus our activity. They are our residents, children and young people, the voluntary and community sector, partners, businesses and our employees. A key step to date is the proposal to establish a citywide Young People's Advisory Group. This has been agreed by all partners, and work has begun with Together for Children, the college and the university to develop the group and ensure our young people help to shape it and lead it. This month, the leader also gave a presentation on low carbon to Sunderland College young people as part of their recent student-led Green Conference, raising awareness of our citywide approach and the key role our young people have to play in this important agenda. Internal communication actions are also progressing well. Low carbon is included monthly in Workwise, Bitesize, and a new employer social network platform is to be created which will be able to be used to share low carbon messages. I hope this provides a useful and positive update on the work that is going on within the Council and with our partners. We will continue to provide updates to the Council as appropriate going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Any members wish to speak on that report? No? Can we note the update from the Deputy Leader?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item is reception of petitions. Do any members have any petitions to present?
Is that Councillor Mullen? Councillor Edgeworth? Councillor Heron?
Do we get this, Lily?
Councillor Mann?
No more?
So, Mr Mayor, that is Councillor Mullen, Councillor Edgeworth, Councillor Heron and Councillor Mann.
Councillor Mullen.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Is this mic work?
No, you'll have to go.
There's one behind you.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. A petition signed by 70 residents on behalf of the Suxworth Conservatives opposing land development on Princetown Terrace and east of Primate Road on the basis that it fails to accord with policies ST3 and HS1 of the core strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Edgeworth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition from 354 people in Hastings Hill and Grindon, which reads, "We, the undersigned, call on Sunderland City Council to create a safe, ground-level pedestrian crossing at Hastings Hill so people don't need to use the existing subway to cross Chester Road." Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This petition is excessive noise and nuisance from Rayton Arena, and this petition has from residents from Dairy Lane, Wheeler Street, Redburn Row and Chilton Moor. We, the undersigned, wish to register complaints about the excessive noise produced by Rayton Arena and associated events held at Mercantile Road, Hortley Spring, Tyne Weir, DH4 5PH. It is our view that the constant noise unreasonably and unsubstantially interferes with the use of our enjoyment of our homes, gardens and outside spaces, and is severe enough for some that it could cause injury. We urge Sunderland Council to investigate the issue as it considers a statutory nuisance under the Environmental Protection Act 1990. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Heron. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor. A petition signed by 59 residents of Birchbury Close, Sunderland, SR4 8AW. We, the undersigned, residents of Birchbury Close, SR4 8AW, petition full council with concerns regarding grasslands between the vehicular access points to our estate and that of the Sycamore Care Home off Nookside in St Anne's Ward. Vehicles not from our estate, such as visitors, delivery and work vehicles, regularly cross over this area as a shortcut or turning point. We consider this dangerous as the area contains main services. It also tears up the grass, leaving deep ruts, which is aesthetically displeasing, especially in winter. It is unsafe for children playing and creates noise nuisance. We ask that officers meet with us for an assessment and propose a physical barrier between the two access roads to prevent this from happening. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Can we agree to refer these to the appropriate officer? Thank you. The next item is written questions from members of the public. I will read the questions and then get the appropriate member to give the answer. The first one is the Holiday Inn at Washington. This is from residents of Sunderland, Peter Noble, Sharon McCarthy and Jill Natras. For over a year, Sunderland and Durham Council have housed homeless at the Holiday Inn at Washington. Residents have suffered appalling antisocial behaviour, including fights, drug dealing, used needles, sex next to a children's park, indecent exposure, and most recently, a sex offender watching children leave school. Can the Leader of the Council explain why sex offenders from across the North East are being housed in Washington South, and how he's represented residents' concern over the last year. Why weren't the residents living on the housing estates close to the inn at Ayton consulted prior to sex offenders and convicted criminals being housed at the Holiday Inn by Sunderland City Council, then subsequently from other councils? Therefore, having their family's safety, mental health and well-being affected for over 15 months. Can the residents have a guarantee that councils will no longer use the Holiday Inn for the purpose of housing council referrals? When are Durham Council going to stop using the Holiday Inn at Washington, Sunderland, to rehouse homeless people, including high-risk offenders? These people are causing residents nothing but stress. Crime levels have increased significantly in the area. Why should Sunderland residents have to put up with this when Sunderland Council are stopping using this hotel? And can I ask the leader to answer that question, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Holiday Inn was used by the council in response to the government's Everyone In campaign, part of the COVID-19 regulations that were imposed on all English local authorities to help deal with the homelessness situation. And it is an obligation on the council to provide accommodation to all people that were sleeping rough and homeless during the current COVID-19 pandemic. Our partners, the local police team, have been involved throughout the use of the hotel and have been very supportive in response to any issues or concerns raised by residents. The police have confirmed that they have not witnessed any increase in crime in the area, and certain issues raised were found to be completely unfounded. Every case that is managed throughout the council's housing option team is fully risk assessed with partners to ensure that all safeguarding and wider risk concerns are fully managed and monitored. Unfortunately, it is not within the council's control to mandate another local authority on how or where it discharges its homelessness duty, though we continue to engage with them when necessary. And as my residents know, I've sent correspondence to the leader of Durham Council regarding this matter. So that's where we are with this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next question is electric vehicle charging points, and it comes from Stephen Thompson. This is the question. The council is currently investigating opportunities to provide... there's the question. My apologies. Are there any plans to put electric charging points in the street around Fatfield so that those people who wish to buy electric or hybrid vehicles can charge their cars overnight, as I can't get a vehicle near my house? And the person, Councillor Claire Roundtree, will answer that. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Council is currently investigating opportunities to provide on-street electrical vehicle charging points in community hub locations across Sunderland where off-street parking is either limited or unavailable. This is being undertaken on a strategic level, but also on a request basis from residents, and will assist in developing a funding bid to government for the infrastructure required. A contact email address of evcharging@sunderland.gov.uk is being set up on the council's parking service webpage to receive requests from residents, which will be communicated to residents of Sunderland in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. The next question is Hmrc Relocation from Deborah Moore. Hmrc is closing Benton Park and relocating 6,500 jobs. Newcastle City Council appear to be cock-a-hoop because they are looking at 2 city centre locations and the revenue for business and transport. Where was the representation from my council to have the regional centre in Sunderland? And I understand the leader will answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Government departments, organisations and companies take a range of factors into consideration as part of their decision-making processes regarding the most appropriate location for their business. And this will have been the case for HMRC in relation to the recent announcement regarding their relatively far-off relocation from Benton Park View. For Sunderland, it is very positive that HMRC has decided to extend their lease on their significant site in Washington until 2030. Officers in city development continue to work proactively with investors, businesses and with government and private sector organisations to identify and progress opportunities to further enhance employment opportunities in the city on an ongoing basis, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. The next item would have been written questions, but there are no written questions for members of council being considered at this meeting.
Point of order, Mayor Sunderland.
Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. I'd like to move a point of order under Rule 4.1.11b, which I believe has been broken here. You yourself said, Mayor Sunderland, earlier on this meeting, that it's important that the democratic process is able to take place and is continuing.
Councillor Hudson,
yep,
2 minutes.
Can the Speaker take his mask off, please?
Councillor Hudson, I really don't think there's any need for me to let you go any further. This
Mayor
has
Sunderland,
already been discussed. Outside of this meeting, you've had an email with the facts of why it's been decided. It will be decided outside of this meeting at a later date.
I would like an email sent to the 5,000 residents of Millfield,
I am not allowing a point of order
and the residents of every ward represented by my councillors who had questions refused.
Councillor, I will not say it again. This has been discussed
in
outside
private,
of this
behind
meeting.
closed doors, once again, Mayor Sunderland.
Councillor Hudson, I don't care where it's been discussed. It is not going to be discussed here tonight. It's going to be discussed outside of this meeting. You've had an email, like every other member, which actually states the reasons and what will be done to either put this right or bring it back into some other form.
Well, Mayor Sunderland, I would like on record my strongest objections and those of my group to the action that has gone in place here.
That will be noted. Thank you very much, Councillor. Someone want a point of order on the same subject?
Similar subject.
I'll allow you to start.
If I'm lucky, I might finish. Thank you, Mr. Point of order in relation to Part 4, Section 1, Rule 11.4, Subsection B, Item 2. I would like to point out that when the opposition leaders had the meeting about the implementation of these rules, we were told that we would receive all answers to questions that were rejected in advance of the meeting. But my question to the Deputy Leader has not yet received a response, and so I'd like to ask permission to ask it now.
Thanks for that point of order. I won't allow you to ask the question now. Well, I will ask the Deputy Leader, would you look into that and see that the answer is forthcoming? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a point of order, please?
Of course you can make a point of order, yes. Again, I'll let you start.
Mr. Mayor, as Leader of the Council, I've been in contact with the opposition leaders, as have the Chief Executive, to get a way through this. And we will be having a meeting of the leaders of all groups. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it in before this full council, probably early in July, to resolve this so that this does not happen again, because we do need questions from councillors as well as from the public. Nobody is denying that. Labour had all its questions cancelled as well. So it's not just the opposition parties that had their questions withdrawn, it was everyone. Because we all agreed to changes in the Constitution back in March, which certain... We absolutely passed it through council, Councillor. And that is the state of the Constitution with where we are with it now. Now, you didn't say any of this once again, Councillor Hodson. Councillor O'Brien, you're very, very good at chipping in from the background without putting your hand up. You didn't say any of this to the Chief Executive. You didn't come forward like you've just said just now, Councillor Hodgson, right? You've been sending very nicely worded emails to everybody, and then, lo and behold, grandstanding at full council again so that you can get a storyline. Right, when what we're talking about here is working to get the council running the best possible way so that democracy is clearly seen to be done properly. And I'm hoping that we can come together after this meeting and find a way forward so that we get questions to council from councillors done in a sensible manner, because in the past we were getting 35 plus questions to council from councillors, of which we were getting through 15 in a council meeting, and 20 of them were getting a written response from officers. Exactly what has happened this time. There is no difference. It's just that everybody's got a written response. And I do apologise to Councillor Mullen if he hasn't had a response on his question yet. But I expect that, you know what, possibly officers have been very busy preparing for a full council, and there might have been a COVID impact in there as well. So thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make it clear it impacts on all of us. It's not just for the opposition parties to try and stand on the middle ground here and say, oh, woe is us. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is Area Arrangements, Annual Report 2020-21. I now call upon Councillor Williams to move the Area Arrangement Annual Report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like a few words before I move the report, and really just to say area arrangement is the area of the vibrant portfolio which I'm very proud of, because it's all about people. It's all about our residents. Each of the 5 areas have similarities, such as litter and fly tipping, and we all deal with them in different ways.
Sorry, Councillor Williams, to interrupt you. I needed to get it seconded before you spoke.
I am so...
But you get a chance of repeating yourself.
I'm so sorry.
Who seconds the report? Councillor Walker,
Right,
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, no, my apologies,
This
Councillor Walker.
these new ways anyway. Okay. I'll get to the bit about each of the 5 areas have similarities, such as litter and how we deal with that, but there are many differences which need that local focus. Each of the areas has different communities and community assets, which area committees support and develop. Let's Talk has been a major tool in listening to residents and in bringing forward the plans to make our communities more resilient and happier. The last 18 months have been totally unpredictable and unplanned because of COVID-19. As a city, we've distributed government grants as well as our own grant schemes to support residents, both businesses and individuals across the city. We work effectively and efficiently with our partners, the voluntary and community sector and Gen 2 for the benefit of our residents. I say we, and that's the royal we, have supported isolated people, lonely, shielding residents with a range of support such as food, and I don't think I've seen as many afternoon teas go out, prescription collections, befriending, and sometimes just a friendly voice on the phone has made a difference. I'm grateful to everyone, and I'm sure the residents are too. To develop that great relationship we have for the future, we've established a VCS Alliance team to work with the VCS to maximise support, as well as have the opportunity to bring in funding so that all groups, whether large or small, can ensure they continue with their delivery. I fully commend this report to you, and I do hope you read it at your leisure. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker, I don't believe you reserve the right to speak. Do you wish to speak now?
If I may, Mr Mayor, just briefly.
Go ahead, thank you.
Mr Mayor, when you consider the year we have had and look at the report, it is quite amazing what has still been achieved. But I would like to focus on the reactive work due to COVID-19, and to say that the work was important is an understatement, as it was a lifeline to some people. Unfortunately, the things most of us take for granted was not possible for some people. The likes of shopping, as Councillor Williams touched on, picking up prescriptions, or even just having that discussion on a daily basis. So I would like to thank the Area Committee and the staff for swiftly putting measures in place to help address some of the issues. But I would especially like to thank the VCS group for helping to deliver these services. Without them, we could never have done it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I understand Councillor Blackburn and Councillor Michael Dixon wish to speak. Before I ask you to speak, is there anyone else wishes to speak on that report? No? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support and endorse the comments of the portfolio holder for Vibrant City, Councillor Linda Williams. The 5 area committees are probably the best way for councillors to be involved with the delivery of those priorities with which their residents have chosen. It is very rarely councillors have control of funding, but area committees now have substantial budgets and can make real change to the areas they represent. Just recently, as a suggestion from a group I am a trustee of, the Hetton Colliery Railway 200 Committee, which was formed to celebrate the bicentenary of the George Stephenson Railway, a time when steam trains travelled from Elmore Colliery at Easington Lane over Warden Law to the Staithes on the River Wear. The Caulfield, East and West area committees formed a task and finish group to look at how the historic Stephenson Trail could be improved. The councillors from the 3 area committees were so enthusiastic about the project that the 3 area committees committed £50,000 each to fund the project. Evidence of how, when working together, councillors can have a positive effect within their area. As the chair of the Caulfield Area Committee, I would like to extend the thanks of the committee members to our area officers and VCS partners, who usually undertake and deliver projects on behalf of the committee. Our VCS partners have been out in the community supporting the city residents during this terrible pandemic, making a real difference to everyday life. Mr. Mayor, although Councillor Williams has delivered a fantastic report, due to space limitations, the report only mentions a small proportion of the many projects delivered and the support area committees give to the residents of Sunderland, which would cover many more pages. Mr. Mayor, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Dixon.
It gives me great pleasure, Mr. Mayor, to congratulate the contents of this report and to give it our full support. The work is from my own experience, second to none, during what can be termed as normal times. Most recently, we've not been living in normal times, and I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Conservative group of councillors to say a big thank you to all council staff working on and with the area committees. Many have toiled tirelessly during this past very difficult council year to ensure that support either from the government or from the council reached those who needed it most. That projects still took place wherever possible, and that planning ahead for the year we now embark upon was always high on the agenda. So as we look at this impressive report and the long list of stats and numbers which have been presented to us for each of the 5 area committees, behind them all is real hard work by individual officers to make them happen, officers who support us on a daily basis. Partnership is the operative description for the functioning of our area committees, with very close working relationships between the council with support and funding and the countless brilliant VCS groups who themselves have worked tirelessly to help those who once again needed it the most. They deserve our sincere thanks, in addition to the many individuals in the city who showed kindness and care for their fellow citizens. A close and harmonious relationship between area committees, the voluntary sector and active residents of the city is essential as we move into this new council year. Area committees are the one body where all councillors, whatever their political persuasion, can take their places. There's no allocation of membership based on notional equations that apply on other committees, in other words, along party lines. I find it no coincidence that because all councillors can contribute to their wards or their own parts of the city, area committees have been very successful, not only during the past year, which we are reviewing now, but also in the years gone by. Teamwork and non-partisanship have been and should remain the key words for any area committee, and to date, to the best of my knowledge, that has been largely achieved. This in turn enables our support officers to operate in a good, positive environment where there is a collective aim, despite our differing political points of view, to serve the people of the city well and with devotion. All of us, including newly elected members, can clearly see in this report how much work has been done and how much has been achieved. It was a very difficult time, but it brought out the best in people, whether volunteers, council officers, voluntary sector, and indeed elected members. Let us all strive to achieve retaining this admirable ethos into the work of our area committees in the months ahead, and hope that the next report in 12 months' time will be equally as admirable and positive as this one presented to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, you do have the right to reply. Do you wish to say any more?
No, I think everyone's been very positive and that's very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we receive and note the area committee's annual report? Thank you. We now move on to the scrutiny annual report of 2020-21, and I now call upon Councillor Doris McKnight to move the annual scrutiny report.
Mr. Mayor, I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Diane Snowden, I believe, will second the report.
Mr. Mayor, I second the report, reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKnight, if you wish to speak to the report.
Thank you. I think Councillor Dixon said quite a bit in area committee what I wanted to say about scrutiny tonight, but never mind. And I present the scrutiny report for 20 and 21. The report provides a brief summary of the work of the Health and Wellbeing, Children's Services, Economic Prosperity and the Overarching Coordinating Committee until April 2021. Although it was dominated by COVID-19, we managed to monitor the impact COVID had had on our local communities. It has been a challenging year for everyone throughout the pandemic, but scrutiny has managed to meet, be it by teams, which a lot of us didn't like, and has allowed us to make more important contributions to the governance of the city. I, for one, will welcome us having meetings like this face-to-face in the future. I would like to thank all the local volunteers. I would be very remiss if I didn't say that not just volunteers for the VCR, but residents who volunteered all over the city, our staff who went out over and above the hours they should have worked and helped the people that was in lockdown with the, befriending them and the most vulnerable people. Also, in conclusion, I would like to thank the members, officers and partners who have contributed to the work of the scrutiny in this past year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I've been informed that Councillors Hudson and Haskell wish to speak on the report. Are there any other members wish to speak on this report? No? We'll go to Councillor Hudson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor of Sunderland. I've just recently returned to the scrutiny committees after a couple of years' absence, and I would certainly echo the words of the chair of the scrutiny committee there that that the officers do a sterling job of getting answers very quickly when requested by councillors. There's no escaping, though, and one thing I did notice, we were reviewing the annual complaints sort of summary, which I haven't reviewed as a scrutineer for some years. But once again, the same massive amount of complaints were coming through in environmental services. I think those of us on the ground, councillors, certainly representing city centre wards, will be familiar with the amount of complaints we're still getting about refuse, cleansing and things like that. my worry, coming back to the scrutiny committee after a period of absence, is that that doesn't seem to have been addressed. It's still a problem. I do worry more generally that our scrutiny process is not fit for purpose, and I'm pleased to see on page 92, brief as it is, a recognition that we will look to conduct a review of the scrutiny process to ensure its effectiveness and impact moving forward. I would like to say, and I would hope, that review will mean that scrutiny more seriously incorporates opposition members in a leadership capacity. Thank you, Mayor Sunderland.
Thank you. Councillor Haswell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to join now in just commending the work of officers. Nigel on the Health Scrutiny Committee has been fantastic for the the year and a bit I've worked with them so far. I just want to really speak on the point around the emerging Healthy City Plan. The report does note a variety of opinions were expressed, and those were the opinions of my group. We've got some significant concerns with some points within this Healthy City Plan, particularly around the Council's approach to alcohol consumption and smoking. The Council, the plan as it stands currently seems to want to continue campaigns which are demonising what is legal behaviour and perfectly reasonable for people to be engaging in. And what my concern is there is a real opportunity actually to do some more positive and proactive work which engages with people rather than brutalises the individual for doing something which, nationally in this country is completely acceptable. Those concerns were expressed in the Scrutiny Committee. It's right that they're raised again tonight for when the plan does come forward. If there hasn't been change, we'd have to obviously challenge it again. I do hope that there's some changes made, echoing our comments that I made in committee, and that we look at how, instead of demonising people, we approach it so that people who may move from moderated consumption to developing a serious health concern, actually they feel comfortable coming forward rather than fearing that they're going to be victimised or demonised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Snowden, Diane Snowden, you did reserve the right to speak. Do you wish to speak? Go ahead.
Mr Mayor, I would like to endorse the work of all of our scrutiny committees in a very difficult year. I would like to thank former Councillor Paula Hunt for her work as the Vice Chair of the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, the role which I have taken up this year, and hopefully I can endeavour to work to her high standards. Mr Mayor, Councillor Hodgson earlier mentioned the complaints report which we looked at our last meeting. I must put on record that this is a compliments and complaints report, and we as a council are seeing more and more compliments coming forward year on year. Once again, I would like to thank the staff of this council at all levels for the work they have done during very difficult times to steer us through this pandemic. Mr Mayor, with that, I will leave the rest to Doris McKnight to close the report.
Thank you. Councillor Doris McKnight, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to say, I don't know why they didn't bring this to, they did bring it to scrutiny on Thursday gone. So I cannot understand why he's brought it to full council. I think he's just trying to point score again. And as for the health, I think Councillor Check has just said it's been to Cabinet, it's been passed. So if they want to ask questions on that, they can speak to Councillor Checker about it. And as for the peer review, it's been ongoing for a while now, and I've always tried to keep scrutiny non-political, which it is, and we are having a peer review, and hopefully we'll get this started sometime in September. Hopefully before, but definitely in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we receive and note the scrutiny annual report? Thank you. We'll move on to action taken on petitions. The report on action of petitions. Does any member wish to comment on the report? No? Can we accept the report? Thank you. I believe that the next item, part of it will be withdrawn, but the next item reports include report of the leader on special urgency decisions, a report on appointments to committees and outside bodies, and the next bit, I believe, the report seeking the approval of the absence from the meetings, you will be deleting, Leader. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
So if you can go from the top, Leader.
There have been no, I moved the report, but there have been no use of special urgency decisions, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Leader, do you second the report? Thank you. The Council agree to receive the report? Agree. Thank you very much. Right, next we deal with the report on the appointments to committees and outside bodies. Leader, would you move the report?
Sorry for not standing there.
No, that's fine.
I move the report for the leader.
Deputy Leader, do you second the report? Thank you very much. Right, Lady, can you speak to the report?
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, the report's fully laid out. It's just filling some vacancies on outside bodies. Thank you.
Deputy Leader, do you wish to speak to the report? Thank you. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Oh, sorry, we need to be, that's in the report. Can we make reference to the nomination of Councillor Greener and A. Wood to the Green Terrace Primary School Trust?
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you. Move on. Notice of motion. Yeah, you can ask a question, yeah. It should have been asked at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I did give notice. That wanted to ask a question on the report on appointments to committees and outside bodies. I just wondered why the Newcastle Airport Consultative Committee isn't listed on this report. It wasn't in the report at last month's council. I just wondered if we do have a representative on that outside body, and if so, who is it and how often do they attend? Thank you.
I can't give an answer to it, Mr.
No,
Mayor. I'll find out and get that to Councillor tomorrow.
I was wondering that myself, yeah. Did you catch that, Councillor? Fine. Right, we'll move on to motions of notice, sorry. Members are reminded that arrangements were made for notice of motions to be given... Sorry, someone indicated. Sorry, Councillor. Even though I'm up here, it's really difficult to take everybody in. Mind that bad back.
I'm just making it clear here, can we make sure we still do use the mics? But I've got hearing aids in and I can't hear. My colleague is much younger, can't hear either, so I think we do need to use those mics a bit.
It's maybe the distance as well, Councillor. Nobody else want to say anything? Right. Motions of notice. Members are reminded that arrangements were made for notice of motions to be given electronically and to be emailed to the Chief Executive rather than signed and delivered in person. Leader, would you like to move suspension of the relevant standing orders with regards to this matter?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move suspension of Standing Order 12 so far as it requires the signing and delivering of a notice of motion to be carried out in person.
Deputy Leader, do you second the motion?
Second the motion, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Does Council agree the suspension of the relevant standing orders? Agreed. Thank you. We move on. Seeking an end to the fire and rehire tactics by employers. We will now deal with the notice of motion in relation to seeking an end to fire and rehire tactics by employers. And I invite the Leader to read and move the motion. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This council notes the increased use by employers in the UK of fire and rehire tactics, forcing their staff to accept worse terms and conditions, leaving many having to work longer hours and for lower pay. That while the Prime Minister has called the practice unacceptable, he has continually refused to take action to outlaw the practice, raising concerns that he will not intervene in this race to the bottom by some employers. This council therefore believes actions are required to ensure local residents are protected against such unscrupulous employers and agrees to the following. Ask the Leader of the Council to write to the Prime Minister demanding he act now and keep his promise to local residents to protect their employment terms and conditions. Promote the increasing number of progressive local employers prioritising their employees' well-being by becoming a real living wage employer. And work with our anchor institutions and key partners to bring forward plans for the introduction of a local employer charter for companies to work towards, with trade union rights, support for the TUC Great Jobs agenda and paying the real living wage at its heart, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Farthing, would you like to second the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I second the motion and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, would you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. One of the great concerns that worried people during the Brexit debate was the potential for a race to the bottom regarding the removal of protections on working people's terms and conditions once we had left the EU umbrella on workers' rights. We were assured by those pushing the Leave argument that this was just scaremongering and would never happen. As it turns out, just another lie told by the Prime Minister to the British people, another lie to add to his ever-growing list. And whilst the Prime Minister has called the practice unacceptable, he has continually refused to take action to outlaw the practice. Same old Tories, say one thing, do another, or in this case, do nothing at all. The Labour Party is standing up for working people. We are trying to end fire and rehire practices. We are fighting a Tory government that patently does not care about normal working people and their working conditions as they continue to refuse to work with us to outlaw fire and rehire as a practice. Unite's General Secretary Len McCluskey called the practice in which employers sack their workers only to rehire them on lower pay and worse conditions as a disease that's ripping through our workplaces. Weak law lets bad bosses force through brutal changes to contracts, sometimes taking thousands of pounds off wages that families need to get by. It's a disgraceful practice that's outlawed in much of Europe, and it should be the same here. Mr. Mayor, fire and rehire is not a new phenomenon, but it has gained prominence recently because of the conduct of many major employers such as British Airways, Heathrow Airport and British Gas, some in circumstances that they claim to be justified by the COVID pandemic, though they continue to take the furlough support and the government grants. The practice has highlighted how weak the current unfair dismissal laws are in this country and how they need to be strengthened. Recently, the Labour Party forced a vote in Parliament to draw attention to Kwasi Kwarteng, the Business Secretary, who admitted to look at the whole range of issues relating to our EU membership and examine what we wanted to keep, but claimed the government is committed to high standards for workers. But obviously not all of them, because he only wants to keep some. Ed Miliband responded by saying Kwarteng had let the cat out of the bag, adding a government committed to maintaining existing protections would not be reviewing whether they should be unpicked at all. Labour's Andy MacDonald told the Commons the government has drawn up plans to end the 48-hour working week, weaken rules around rest breaks and exclude overtime when calculating holiday pay entitlement. The Shadow Employment Rights Secretary then added, if the government has its way, these changes will have a devastating impact on working people. Quite simply, it will mean longer hours, lower wages and less safe work. The government have made all the right noises about fire and rehire, but so far have done absolutely nothing about it, Mr Mayor. And I hope the Minister will tell us when the government will back up those mealy-mouthed words with action and act to outlaw this immoral practice. If this government is serious about levelling up and raising standards, they must commit to ending fire and rehire once and for all. Fire and rehire as a practice must not be allowed to continue. Workers should not be forced to choose between losing pay or losing their jobs, and Parliament must act urgently to outlaw this form of industrial blackmail. A recent Survation poll found that 76% of those asked said that it should be against the law, fire and rehire. That figure included 71% of Conservative voters. 2/3 of those polled suggested that they would be less likely to buy goods or services from a company that used fire and rehire as a practice. That is why this Labour Council calls on the Prime Minister and the Tory government to keep his promise, I don't think he even knows what that means, to local residents to protect their employment terms and conditions. This Labour Council will show what proper leadership is to the Prime Minister and his government of cronies on this matter. We, this Labour Council, will fight for the working terms and conditions of every Sunderland employee on this matter. We will fight to improve their working conditions, not reduce them. We will work with our partners to make the real living wage the norm across the city, and we will do all of this because it is the right and proper thing to do, Mr Mayor. And I hope that all councillors in this chamber today can support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any amendments? I understand Councillor Haswell and O'Brien wish to speak on the motion. Is there anyone else wish to speak?
Councillor Mullen. Councillor Stewart. Is that Councillor MacDonough? So, Mr Mayor, the speakers are Councillors Haswell, O'Brien, Mullen, Stewart, MacDonough. Councillor Farthing reserved the right to speak, and then the leader has the right of reply.
So we'll have Councillor Haswell first. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First view of this motion, it's nice, it's positive. Overall, the theme is good, but it is a little bit light on detail in terms of actions for us as a council. Fire and rehire is deplorable, it's unfair, it's unreasonable, it's a way for employers to shirk their responsibilities to their workforce. So the overall theme of it, we're absolutely in favour of. But my concern is, and my group's concern, is that we're calling the Prime Minister to act. However, we could have drawn up a formal policy ourselves to commit not to fire and rehire as a council. So there is a feeling here that we're calling on the Prime Minister to do something, but we aren't willing to do ourselves and just want to be pushed into it from a national level. We do have that ability now to write our own policy, and just the other day, HR committee was cancelled for lack of business. We could have had a policy discussion at that meeting about this very subject. I do believe that there's also partner organisations that we currently work with who in the recent past have engaged in fire and rehire. So to already be doing something about it now, and we've quite happily partnered for them for quite a while, is rather worrying. And within these groups, I believe there's everyone activate, AG and others. So, you know, it would be useful if we got our own house in order before we start pushing this onto others. I also was interested that Graham says that the government needs to get serious about this. Well, are we getting serious? Because we could be doing something now. Another quick point around the requirement of partner organisations to have trade union involvement. The only worry I have with that is some organisations which are smaller may not be able to afford significant amounts of trade union facility time, paying for full-time officers and so on. So as long as we can make sure that smaller businesses, yes, allow, keep the contract so staff can be a member of a trade union, but we don't make it overly burdensome, so we can still work with smaller businesses within the city while also encouraging them to protect the rights of their workers as well. But the Liberal Democrat group will be voting in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Councillor O'Brien.
I have nothing more to add, Mr. Mayor. I'll just withdraw my my speech, given time constraints.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we had a slight debate earlier about the reason behind changes to council meetings and cutting out unnecessary business in order to make meetings shorter. And many of us said at the time that that would actually be an attempt to weaken scrutiny and silence the opposition. And I think that this motion is proof of that, because here the leader is proposing to ask council permission for him to be able to write a letter. Now, I knew he'd lost support within the Labour Party, but I didn't realise it got so bad that he was now having to ask permission to write letters. So I'd like to give some examples of letters that I've written on the theme of workers and employment and workers' rights, Mr. Mayor. When I wrote to the business secretary on behalf of residents of the city who'd got in touch to ask me about support for apprenticeships in the automotive sector, I didn't bring that to council for a vote. I just wrote to Alok Sharma, and he sent me the details back, and I passed it on to residents. When I recently wrote to a judge to stop a council employee losing his house, I didn't bring that to council as a motion. When I wrote to the Holiday Inn and to Durham Council about the concerns we heard about earlier in that public question, I didn't bring those concerns and that letter for a vote in council either. When whistleblowers from this council contacted me to disclose evidence of bullying, intimidation and sexual harassment happening within this establishment, didn't ask for permission from council to write to the police and the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. I just did it. Typical example of the same old Tories doing nothing at all. So while we're on that and talking about what happens in our council, given that the leader was particularly uncharitable about what Conservatives think about workers' rights and our willingness to stand up for people, I think there are members of council who already know that I have been meeting with members of staff in this council, listening to what they have gone through, and I've listened to people employed by this council talking about their attempts to commit suicide because how they have been treated. And one person I'd like to raise in particular speaks directly to this theme. A member of staff who is a seasonal recruit had worked for the council year in, year out, and then raised a grievance because of how he'd been treated. And then the next time he applied was told, you haven't got the experience to do the job, a job that he had already been doing for the council. So I hope, given that I have raised this already privately, and given what the leader has just said, which was particularly unfavourable to the attitudes that people like me have, clearly my actions on this speak to them about my care for it. But I hope that he will offer to meet with me or to ring me so I can pass on the details of that person, and he will look into it to make sure that that kind of treatment doesn't happen within the council again. Because the previous speaker, I think it was Councillor Haswell, was quite right that we do need to get our own house in order. So my group will be voting in favour of this, but I do so with the full knowledge of what has happened in this council and all of the evidence that has been put forward to the independent inquiry about it. And the kind of speech that the leader has just delivered was really out of order, given what's happened locally. Really out of order.
Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'll start off by saying on a personal level, I think we're wasting our time in suggesting we write to the Prime Minister. But I do believe that it is an opportunity for the people of Sunderland to see once again if Boris really cares for them. So I'm eagerly will be waiting the response from the Prime Minister with regard to that letter that our leader will be issuing. Due to the government's continually allowing the race to the bottom by unscrupulous employers, we need to ask ourselves, and I want to concentrate on this, as what are we doing as a council and what can we do to help mitigate the situation, despite the moral vacuum that is at the heart of this current government. Basically, what are we doing to attempt to limit the impact of such disgraceful actions by some unscrupulous employers on struggling families in this city? And I'm minded, Mr Mayor, I'm pleased to remind members that this council already has plans to support struggling families with a £1 million fund to support them, announced by the Labour group as part of this year's council budget. And a reminder again, council, that the opposition parties opposed the introduction of that fund at that meeting. As we as a council and we as a Labour group rightly anticipated little or no help from central government. This of course has now been dwarfed by the Labour group's decision, and since approved by Cabinet, to use nearly £20 million of reserves to fund a COVID recovery action plan for residents in this city. This Labour group has ensured that the council has in place a coordinated plan to promote community wealth, both social and financial. And as part of its community wealth building strategy, a key milestone of this has been the Labour group decision to ensure we became the first council in the North East to become an accredited real living wage employer, ensuring that moving forward our employees, and through procurement, staff of other employers winning contracts with this council, are all paid a fair wage that you can live on. In the past few months, we've been working with the Real Living Wage Foundation to look at how we and local employers can work together to begin to the next stage of our journey to be the first real living wage city in the North East. This work is progressing with several local employers already paying the real living wage, including traditionally low-paid sectors such as social care, proving that you do not need to race to the bottom to be a successful company. Our community wealth building programme also includes the development of an employer's charter, where gold standard will include the real living wage, but also trade union rights, the incorporation of the TUC Great Jobs Agenda, in addition to ensuring that they have robust systems in place to protect against modern-day slavery. This gold-silver type charter will be an invaluable tool in assessing contracts and ensuring those who are fair to their workforce are duly recognised in their actions as part of our procurement process. Ultimately, though, we should not be afraid to name and shame companies involved in the fire and rehire of staff, whether that be from British Airways through to British Gas, as their actions are a complete disgrace. Residents should contrast the actions undertaken by this Labour group through this council to try and protect struggling families where we can, and the morally bankrupt government under Boris that continues to sit on its hands and do nothing. Yet another broken promise to the residents of this city. I would urge members to support the motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McDonough.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. It was very nice to see you at the Sunderland City 5K as I whizzed past you on the finish line there on Saturday.
Very well.
Good to see you.
So did the rest of you.
I will be brief, but I must say I'm slightly confused by this motion for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we've not been allowed to scrutinise the council in public tonight, with all questions to the council's leadership rejected, and the excuse for this has been put down to lack of time. And as many have already suggested, this is a complete disgrace, stopping councillors from openly scrutinising the leadership of the council and pushing democracy and accountability behind closed doors. I would say to Labour members that they should have a serious conversation with their leader about this, as many questions from the Labour side have also been rejected. What is your leadership trying to hide? You must also take into account that in 12 months' time, you are likely to be opposition councillors yourselves. And the ability to openly question and scrutinise the administration is essential in democracy. Sorry,
Councillor,
Phil.
I'm struggling.
Sorry, I'm coming on to it. I do apologise, Mr Mayor. I do apologise. However, I digress. And going back to the lack of time excuse, here we see a motion in which the leader of the council is asking himself to write a letter. Is that a good use of council time? I think not. Secondly, I thought I would look into this issue further, because surely, before the leader has decided to bring this motion to council, he would ensure that his own house was in order with regard to employment policy. Surely he would. Oh dear. This council, the partner organisations of this council, have themselves used fire and hiree tactics. My colleague Councillor Mullen has already gone into a bit of greater detail on what's going on within the council, but surely before wagging the finger at government and at business, the leader of the council should get this council sorted first. This is something that really interests me, and I don't disagree with the leader that fire and rehire should be addressed. It absolutely should. But it should be addressed here and now before we go off lecturing others. I decided to look into this, how this has worked in Sunderland Council, and was furnished with some very interesting figures. One of the ways in which people are fired and rehired, as many of you will know, is to place them on zero-hour contracts, something that many in this place have rallied against, and rightly so. I was aghast when I discovered that Sunderland Council employ people on zero-hour contracts. Of course, they don't call them zero-hour contracts. They call them variable-hour contracts. Good to know that the old PR budget is going to good use, isn't it? According to figures obtained by me, this council employs 257 employees on variable hours contracts, but this does not include staff employed in schools. And these contracts are very popular with positions such as classroom assistants, so the figure is actually likely to be a lot higher. Now, the leader may say that this is a way of keeping staff on the payroll. Sadly, one of his affiliated unions does not agree. Unison, who gave over £7 million to the Labour Party last year, have slammed these variable hour contracts and called them nothing better than a zero hours contract in disguise. They have also called for their abolition. According to Unison, the reality of these contracts is that people have no guarantee of earned income, increase the difficulties of arranging dependent care due to uncertainty. There is a massive impact on families, not only financially. It increases the pressure on people, including mental stress, impacts on training opportunities for staff. It's linked to the erosion of terms and conditions of employment for workers, impacts on equality at work, impacts on the delivery of services, is detrimental to the impact of work-life balance, and it has the potential to increase bullying and victimisation at work by withholding hours. Not my words, the words of my good friends over at Unison, one of the Labour Party's biggest donors. As I said before, we don't disagree that fire and rehire needs to be addressed. It does. But I would urge this council to look urgently at its own position before lecturing others. If we are a caring council, then we must be a doing council. It's very easy to make a speech, as you will see. But a speech doesn't do anything without action. I would urge the leader to take action and not simply use words, but we will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Farthing, you reserved the right to speak. Do you wish to speak now?
In January, I moved a motion calling on the government to take action to reduce child poverty. And that's the reason that I second this motion. In Sunderland, child poverty has risen from 25.7% in January 2020 to 30% in 2021, measured by the number registered for free school meals. A total of 11,437 children and young people in poverty. However, families on universal credit are eligible for free school meals if their family income is below 7,400 before benefits are taken into account. Families receiving child tax credit are only eligible for free school meals if they are not also entitled to working tax credit and have an annual gross income of no more than £16,190. Families receiving working tax credit are not eligible for free school meals. 75% of children growing up in poverty in the UK, and presumably in Sunderland, live in a household where someone works. And according to the North East Child Poverty Commission, there are additional children living in households where their income is 60% below the median after housing costs, and that's another 4,900 children. 2 years ago, when Nadim Sahawi told me in a plenary session on answering my question about children living in poverty that the way out of poverty was to get parents to work, he seemed to be ignorant that the majority of benefit claimants are in work. And the only way that we will reduce child poverty is to ensure that work does pay at least a real living wage. Fire and rehire on poorer conditions works contrary to the need to make employers pay decent wages and provide good conditions so that overtime is not compulsory and that workers can get time to spend with their children. The government's failure to prevent this type of underhand activity means that it is not levelling up but levelling down to the lowest common denominator. And I understand from my colleague who works for Everyone Active that they have not used the fire and rehire. What they've had to do is to make staff take voluntary redundancy, but there's little chance of rehire until we get back to normal. And of course, they will not be rehired on worse conditions. And I would also draw the opposition's attention to the fact that we've had thousands of council employees made redundant because of the Tory austerity policies. Those families in Sunderland will have definitely have gone through trauma and concern. I am pleased to second the motion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, you have the right to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do genuinely appreciate that everybody seems to be going to support the notice of motion. So thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. But a few comments on what was said by a variety of councillors. It was very interesting listening to Councillor Haswell. For a moment, I was actually thought I was listening to the leader of the Tory councillors in the room, given what he was saying and his clear love for the current Tory government. So just remember, everybody, that old adage of vote yellow, get blue still applies. Councillor, I knew you'd like that. Thanks very much. I'll be back next week. Now, Councillor Mullen. We all write letters as councillors. You've got a tendency to write letters into other people's wards without telling them, and to get into other people's wards without telling them. Writing to Durham about ward issues that are Councillor Farthing, Councillor Donaghy, now that he's elected, and myself, without actually telling us and without letting us see what you're doing. A bit disappointed with that, but you do it. Yeah, it's all great, Councillor Mullen. You shouldn't. I'm a ward councillor for the South Ward, not you. I seem to think that you're quite far away with enough issues to deal with in Barnes. Compared to the government, this council's so in order. So in order. And I've got to point out to the opposition councillors, my last letter to the Prime Minister got us several £million. Or do you forget that? Because you lot didn't want us to ask for more money for the government. Oh, we're fine, we've got enough. And our deficit would be even bigger. So I'll continue writing letters to the Prime Minister to try and influence his chaotic thinking, if I can get him away from working out how to spend money in his flat and how he gets to go on his holidays soon. We are a real living wage employer. Our community wealth building credentials and our work with partners are unparalleled in England. And I absolutely do not need Conservative councillors who've opposed it all trying to talk against it when we've dragged you kicking and screaming to where we are now, where we at least try and ensure that everybody who works with the council and for the council, whether they're contracted staff or otherwise, gets a proper day's pay for a decent day's work. And you lot need to think and reflect on that. Councillor McDonough, smoke and mirrors, gaslighting for 3 minutes, lack of scrutiny, just rubbish. You've just approved the scrutiny report, man, for Christ's sake. Honestly, I sometimes wonder if you lot actually think about what you're going to say before you come into this meeting. And whilst May is 10 months away, There's many a slip. So I wouldn't get triumphalist about it quite yet, ladies and gentlemen. Right? 0-hour contracts or variable hour contracts. Unison. Is that it? Is that your argument? Nothing about the council, because we are actually doing a good job with our employees and our, the companies that we work with, but absolutely nothing about the government. The disgraceful government that's trying to, by the back door, take people's terms and conditions away, which they said were absolutely guaranteed when we were back in 2016. Gove, Johnson, all of them. And he will not work with the Labour Party in Parliament. He's told his parliamentarians to abstain because he doesn't want to do it, because this helps his donors make more money out of the workforce. And that's what's really behind this. So, as I said, Mr. Mayor, in the spirit of unanimity, I'll stop there and thank everybody for their support. Cheers. Thank you.
Can we agree the motion? I'll listen to a point of order.
What's the point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on a point of clarification, can I ask the leader, when he said we're doing a good job with our employees, was that an agreement that he would meet with me to talk about the case I raised or not?
More than happy for Councillor Millen to phone me, Zoom or Teams me about this, and we'll get it looked into. But in 3 and a bit years, I'm still waiting for my first opposition councillor to do any of that regarding anything. They seem to prefer to bring it here, Mr. Mayor, and do it as a political thing for a bit of a headline.
As I said earlier, can we agree the motion?
Agree.
Thank you. We move on to the next one, Newcastle Airport.
Have to leave the room, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I believe so. Right. We'll now deal with the notice of motion which is on the subject of Newcastle Airport. Can I call upon Councillor Hudson to read and move the notice?
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. I think I've missed a trick here in writing such a short motion. I thought we'd be desperately short of time. But it is a mere sentence. This council resolves to write to Newcastle International Airport to urge its directors to rename the airport Newcastle Sunderland International Airport. I move the motion. Thank you, Mayor Sunderland.
Councillor Edgeworth, would you like to second the motion?
I'll second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hudson, do you want to speak to the motion?
Certainly would, Mayor Sunderland. Thank you very much. We were recently invited, all of us, to take a look at the council's new My Sunderland promotional website, and I, being an obliging sort, have done so. For those of you in this room who haven't yet, if you Google My Sunderland and then you scroll down several pages of Google until you're past all the various links to web pages for the long-established Sunderland University My Sunderland internal network, you'll find the council's promotional site. Anyway, on finding that site, I was struck by bullet point 1 of, quote, what makes Sunderland great? Sunderland is well connected by rail and an international airport. Bullet point 1, rail and air connections make Sunderland great according to this council. Now, and I don't completely disagree, but I wondered how that might resonate with residents. Speaking to residents on the door, they often seem to think that we're the region's poor relations when it comes to transport links. For most people, our rail station is an embarrassment. They're quite right. Its national services inadequate, certainly compared to Durham and Newcastle. Our metro system is a system into which Sunderland paid for decades before even being properly connected up. Expanding the metro system still seems like a pipe dream. Nexus seems to remain a Tyneside-focused institution. One resident asked me recently, why is it that on the metro, Sunderland station is called Sunderland, but Newcastle station is called Central rather than Newcastle Central? As so often, this is a little thing, but the whole system seems to revolve around our friends on Tyneside and not the wider North East and Tyne and Wear. But perhaps I'll save renaming that one for another motion on another day. I wondered in the same spirit, though, Mayor, can we make the airport better serve Sunderland's interests? Is Newcastle International really the best or most appropriate name for our regional hub airport? Why not rename it Newcastle Sunderland International Airport? It's worth stressing, of course, for everyone in the room, that Sunderland Council is a stakeholder in the airport as much as any other local authority in the region. We as a council are investors in the airport. We have a seat on the board. That's 2 seats indeed. That's why our leader and deputy leader have left the room. It is not Newcastle's airport. It's a regional hub airport. All of us in this room know that because we use it to go on our holidays. Tyne and Wear has 2 big metropolitan cities, Sunderland and Newcastle, which together ought to drive visitors, students, residents and investors to the North East as a region. Too often, it feels like a contest in which the 2 cities are pitted against one another rather than complementing each other. It's 30 years next year, Mayor of Sunderland, that Sunderland became a city. And we think that we as a region should be doing something to mark that. Something nice and symbolic. There's no doubt that changing the name of the airport to reflect the 2 great cities of the North East would be a grand gesture and a statement of intent about this city. We think the benefits are clear. Firstly, to promote the city to visitors and people across the world. Secondly, to acknowledge that the airport serves the wider North East beyond Newcastle. And thirdly, to make clear Sunderland's global footprint and its global ambitions, made so clear on that My Sunderland website, not the university one. I hope all councillors will support our city and support this motion. Thank you very much, Mayor Sunderland.
Thank you. Councillor Edgeworth, you didn't reserve the right to speak. Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as the first time I've spoken, can I just say a big thank you to all the colleagues and officers, particularly members' services, for all their help and patience with their newly elected councillors. It's much appreciated. And it's a pleasure to second this motion to rename the airport as Sunderland Newcastle International Airport, or the other way around if you prefer. Having got lots of press coverage for our campaign in the Echo and beyond, and having caused quite a stir and annoyed a lot of mags along the way, I'm quite tempted to say it's job done, but as Niall Hodgson has mentioned, there is a serious point behind raising this motion, and that's for too long people in our city have felt that this council hasn't had enough ambition for Sunderland. There's a feeling that we don't shout loud enough, we don't celebrate all that's great about Wearside, and we don't talk about potential, and frankly that we let ourselves be in the shadow of Newcastle too often. So putting Sunderland on the map and making sure that the world knows that we're here, knows that we're a city with great connections to the rest of the North East is a good thing. It's good for investors, for businesses and institutions like our university, and we need to be in the press shouting about Sunderland whenever we can. It's our job to speak up for the city. And the fact that people believe that this council has failed to stand up for Sunderland for decades is why many residents have such a poor opinion of it. If the Vaux site was in Newcastle, it wouldn't have been allowed to stand empty for 20 years. Newcastle wouldn't let itself have the worst train station in the country. People in Sunderland have had to put up with being an afterthought when it comes to the metro, and for large parts of the city we still are. And Newcastle gets the lion's share of any investment and attention come to the North East. If you knock on some doors, these are the messages you'll get from many of our residents. And there's a feeling that this council has let Sunderland be portrayed as the poor relation for too long, and we all know that we're not. So decades of complacent Labour leadership in this city has meant we haven't seen enough investment and regeneration. Sunderland Arc, the Homeside Triangle, the empty Crowtree site, the Vaux fiasco rumbling on for 2 decades. It's no wonder people are cynical about these things. So I think renaming the airport, which we own just as much as Newcastle, is one good way to show that things don't have to be the way they've always been. This will put Sunderland on the map in a way which resonates with our residents. New roads and buildings are all well and good, but putting Sunderland's name front and centre in our regional airport would show that Sunderland is a key city in the North East. It would show that we're an ambitious city, and it would show that we aren't going to accept second best just because it suits Newcastle to keep things the way they are. Having the airport reflect both great cities it serves, just like Leeds Bradford, just like Doncaster Sheffield airports, it's one way to show that we're serious. Serious about promoting and speaking up for all Sunderland has to offer. Serious about securing investment and jobs. Serious about attracting businesses, students and tourists. Liberal Democrats are serious about talking up Sunderland and serious about making this city the best place it possibly can be to work, live, study, visit and do business. And we're serious about this notion. So I hope you'll take this seriously too and support this plan, because the status quo hasn't served Sunderland's interests. We'll be letting Sunderland down if we don't vote for this motion. And if this council and those of us in this room don't take every opportunity to fight for the best for Sunderland, then no one else is going to do it for us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I understand the Cabinet Secretary wishes to move an amendment. Would you like to read that out, Cabinet Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After urge its directors to, can we delete rename the airport Newcastle Sunderland International Airport and add consider suitable options for renaming the airport that will best reflect the area it serves, so that the new, we go to the next. The revised motion will read, this council resolves to write to Newcastle International Airport to urge its directors to consider suitable options for renaming the airport that will best reflect the area it serves.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, I believe you are going to second the amendment.
Yes, I'd like to second the amendment and reserve the right to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Cabinet Secretary. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Edgeworth, in the press and in his speech there, seconding the original motion, stated that the name change was key to putting Sunderland on the map as an ambitious city that is serious about attracting jobs and businesses and investment. I would like to remind him that you do not need to change the name of an airport to be a successful and ambitious city. The ambition of this Labour group was shown when we convinced Nissan to come to Sunderland. And the reason I mention that is that Sunderland did once upon a time have its own airport, and that actually is situated where Nissan is now. And with the introduction of Nissan, it brought tens of thousands of jobs to the northeast, supporting many families in Sunderland. Sunderland is the automotive powerhouse in the country and is known throughout the world. Mr. Mayor, we don't need a gimmick of a name change of an airport to be an ambitious city. More recently, our ambition was shown when we convinced Legal & General to invest in this city as part of a major capital investment that is the envy of Newcastle and the rest of the North East. Around £500 million of investment is taking place in this city, such as the Riverside development, creating thousands of jobs, the new build for the regional eye infirmary, the new walk bridge to connect communities, the new dedicated park on the river that we're going to get, and Smart City of the Year, Mr. Mayor. We're the digital centre of the UK. That's a success, that's ambition, and we did that without the renaming of an airport. 5G. We've got major plans approved to be the most advanced city in the UK, leaving Newcastle in the slow lane. And carbon neutral, Mr. Mayor, that's ambition, to be carbon neutral by 2030, something opposed by the Liberal Democrats on this city council. Becoming a social landlord again, that's ambition. Having become the first accredited real living wage employer council in the North East, with ambition to become the first real living wage city. That's ambition, and we did that without renaming the Newcastle Airport. Again, I would say we do not need a gimmick to show ambition. I'm sure many in the room will be aware that the airport, Newcastle Airport, was officially opened in 1935 as Woolsington Aerodrome, and only later in the 1970s did it take on the name Newcastle, and in 2002, I do believe it changed to Newcastle International. Mr. Mayor, armed with the location, I then typed Woolsington into Google Maps and was shocked to find that it was not in Sunderland. Even more, I was shocked to find that it's within the Callerton and Throckley ward in Newcastle. So how dare they call an airport based in Newcastle, Newcastle International Airport? Simply because it's in Newcastle? I mean, the cheek of it, Mr. Mayor. The Liberal Democrats in the press mentioned, and it's been mentioned as well tonight, well, what about Leeds Bradford? Well, Leeds Bradford is a 100% privately owned company owned by APM Capital. The people in the region have no say in the naming of the airport and get no benefits as the profits of that airport go to private shareholders. Then they reference Doncaster Sheffield. Well, it's a 100% private company owned by a different company this time, the Peel Group. Again, people in that region have no say on what the airport was called and got no benefits and get no benefits as the profits go to private shareholders.
Point of order, Mayor.
So let's... Right?
I said point of order.
Point of order. 2 minutes.
I'll just use this, Paul, so you don't have to move. Sorry, I was just getting a bit confused, Mayor Sunderland. This is on the Rules of Procedure 4.1.13.h. On moving an amendment, is the Cabinet Secretary speaking for his amendment or against his amendment? Because I don't think that's quite clear.
I think it will become clear. I hope.
So, Mr Mayor, let's go back to our regional airport situated in Newcastle. Not Sunderland, not Durham, not Gateshead or North Tyneside. It's not in South Tyneside or Northumberland. All of whom are shareholders in the airport, including APM Capital. And each one of them has just as much as right as Sunderland to suggest, well, why do we not have the name of their local authority in the name of the airport?
Councillor, can I just interrupt you? You have reached the 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I am now winding up.
I'm more than happy to give you another 3 minutes.
Okay, but I do believe I was interrupted by a point of order.
Certainly take her into account.
Okay. I am aware that the Liberals have been getting some serious bad press over this motion, Mr Mayor, and we're all well deserved, and to be honest, it's part of their own making. However, this amendment is an attempt to give the motion some meaning other than it being a poor attempt at flag waving destined to go nowhere. To change the name, then you need to get a majority of shareholders to agree with you. And as Sunderland is only a minority shareholder, you need to convince others there is a benefit in a name change. This amendment therefore asks that they consider a review of suitable options. That will be something that you would expect any company to review from time to time, weighing up the benefits against the risk of change. This council does not need gimmicks to show off its ambition, as it is there for everybody to see. Sunderland is already leading in the North East on so many fronts. This should not be a reason for the change of the name of a regional airport. That should be a business need. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I understand Councillors Noble and Doyle wish to speak on the motion. Sorry. Can I ask you if you wish to speak on the amendment? And is there anyone else wishing to speak? First of all, could I have an answer from the two councillors I've just mentioned? Do you wish to speak on the amendment?
I do, yes.
Could Councillor Noble please confirm if she wishes to speak on the amendment? Sorry, I can't see where Councillor Noble is sitting.
Oh, do you wish to speak on the
amendment, Councillor Noble? You don't wish to speak on the amendment that's been moved? Thank you.
So we'll have to take speeches on the motion.
So it's speeches on the
amendment. Anyone wish to speak on the amendment?
Councillor Mann. Councillor Hodson.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly.
So, Mr Mayor, on the amendment, that's Councillor Doyle, Mann, Hodson and Councillor Williams reserved the right to speak. Sorry, Councillor Hodson actually has the right of reply on the amendment.
Right, yeah.
Apologies.
So the first one?
So it's Councillor Doyle.
Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must begin by congratulating Councillors Hodson and Edgeworth on what has been quite the media coup. And who would have thought that a single sentence motion could provoke such a huge amount of social media coverage and attention. I'm sure there is a lesson in brevity there to be learned by members in the Labour group. Now, I've spent some time reviewing the comments made online about the original motion, and a large number, I'm afraid to say, Mr. Mayor, are rather unkind and a bit offensive. And that there is quite some anger being directed towards our Lib Dem colleagues on this, and not just from followers of the Newcastle Chronicle. Sunderland Echo readers too seem to be a bit cheesed off that their elected representatives, people, let's not forget, who were elected to do a job, to serve their community, to make a difference for their electorate, are spending their time instead debating something frankly as trivial as this. And it's not to say that I don't support the right of colleagues to make a request of Newcastle Airport in their own time. I would even go as far as to say that I have no quarrel with Councillor Hodson and Councillor Edgeworth lobbying the Conservative group outside of this meeting to sign an open letter or make some other public declaration. But, colleagues, is it really a worthwhile use of our time as a full council to be debating this, bearing in mind, of course, that we are now subject to a 3-hour guillotine? Of course, we're getting through business tonight rather quickly. But have we not more pressing issues to contend with than this? And really this brings me on to what I consider was the prevailing sentiment when I was reading social media comments about this motion, speaking with residents in Fulwell as well, and also members of the Conservative group. And there is an overwhelming indifference to the original proposal. There are a few members of the group who think it's a nice idea, others who seem to be a bit irrationally annoyed by it, and then the majority who simply couldn't care less. And that majority, I would submit, cares more about council tax, cares more about refuse services and highways and back lanes and gratuitous allowances than what is, unfortunately, something of a media stunt. And so in the Conservative group, we took I think, the very sensible decision to allow a free vote on the original motion. I intended to abstain on that original motion because I want to make it clear that I and my residents believe the opposition should be using its time more effectively. I think the amendment is slightly more sensible than the original motion, but again, we'll be leaving it up to our members to decide for themselves. And before I sign off, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Mullen really did want me to point out in response to something that Councillor Stewart said, that it was Margaret Thatcher who went to Japan to lobby Nissan to come here, not our then council leader, and that's why they have a And that is why they have a portrait of Mrs. Thatcher hanging up on the wall and not a portrait of the then council leader. Thank you very much.
Councillor Mann.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm only speaking to this amendment really because if we don't need a gimmick, Councillor Stewart, why the amendment and why a big, massive, back-slapping speech that you always like any opportunity to do that? And we all love our city. We all care about our city. We all know what we do. We're all elected here and standing here to do it, so we care about our city. All of my residents that I've asked about it simply couldn't care less, to be honest. They care more about food in mouths and things for their youth to do. And that's what I care about as well. So if you want to bring a motion to council to write to the directors to ask them about it, do so. They can only say no. But do we need to have this massive motion about it? Fair enough, it's a good point, yes. Whether Councillor Stewart thinks it's a gimmick or it isn't, you know, nobody really, they just want to go on their holidays to Caulfield from the airport after this horrible year that we've had. We'll be going for it, so good luck. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Right, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of points really following on to support the amendment. It isn't our choice. It is definitely up to the directors of the airport. But that said, it is always good to review strategy and vision to see where we're going with that. You have to think that Newcastle Airport, as it is set up throughout the world as a system with NCL on baggage tags. There would be a huge cost to changing all of that, to booking systems for travel agents, etc. Are we having a chat? Yes. Oh, okay, would you like to chat with me? Because I'm talking at the moment. No, it's all right. I'd appreciate you listening. Right, so looking at this, sort of looked at London is the biggest area. We have 6 airports in London. We have Gatwick, Heathrow, London City, London Stansted, London Luton and London Southend. Rather a lot in there. From the other part, I would just say that I would agree with Councillor Doyle. There is a lot of indifference about this, apart from my son coming in and saying, what on earth are you lot talking about changing the name of the airport for? That's bonkers. He is a Newcastle supporter and that's where his bit comes from. We are an ambitious city. We've seen lots. You look around, there's cranes, there's work going on. There's people complaining about roads being closed because there's work going on. We've got to remember as well, the city incorporates Washington, Horton and Hetton as well, and very much I tend to find certain councillors who live within the city centre area seem to forget about that. I'd just like you to bring us back to that. I'd also probably like to say, can we write and say, would you consider calling it Newcastle Washington International Airport? Because Washington DC, theirs is called Dulles. So just leave it at that. I support the motion. Thank you.
Just before I bring Councillor Hudson in, can I please ask anyone leaving this room to go to the toilets to put your mask on? We've just been texted from the Department of Health to remind you of that. We're still under quite severe restrictions. Councillor Hudson, you've got the right to reply.
Yes, thank you, Mayor of Sunderland. You can rely on the Liberal Democrats to provide some entertainment. I mean, this is the, some party has to provide the light relief in British politics and Sunderland's politics, and I'm more than happy for that to be the Liberal Democrats. And I wouldn't be a Liberal Democrat if I didn't accept a really crappy compromise. This is why have proportional representation electoral reform when you can have a referendum on the alternative vote? Likewise, why have a definitive statement when you can have a wishy-washy commitment to do nothing? I'm all for it. So we'll be for this amendment. Great stuff. Thanks, Paul. It was a great speech. Really confusing, but kept me on my toes. All in favour. Thanks, Mayor Sunderland.
Thank you. Can we agree the amendment? Agree. Good. Thank you very much. That's the one we're going to use now. Right, colleagues, I'm sure you can all read, but it's my duty to read it to you. So the amended motion would read, this council resolves to write to Newcastle International Airport to urge its directors to consider suitable options for renaming the airport that will best reflect the area it serves. Agreed? Agreed. Anyone else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Noble, I can see you behind.
Mayor, can I move that the question now be put?
I'll say it. You have to say it. Oh, well.
I think we'll give a couple of chances. I intend to give a couple to speak because I think we've fully debated this. I can see you behind the counter. We'll start with Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for our new colleagues in the room, I'm Councillor Karen Noble, St Anne's Ward, and welcome to your first lovely debate one. It's very quick today. I think I need to start by saying that I only usually speak at full council when I really feel I've got something worthwhile to say. I'm not one for raining on someone's parade for the sake of it or to score a political point. That being said, I really need to speak about this motion of notice, regardless of amendments. So just for people who are watching at home or are not too sure what the role is, let's just recap on what a councillor's role is. A councillor's primary role is to represent their ward or division and the people who live in it. Councillors provide a bridge between the community and the council, represent their views at council meetings and lead local campaigns on their behalf. Now, I've worked in the community for over 20 years. I've been an elected member for the last 3 years, and I have took part, facilitated and inputted in the citywide Let's Talk survey, which residents gave their views on issues that mattered. I have never once had the airport name ever given to me as an issue. I mean, who has? Anyone? No. Councillor Doyle, I think we must have wrote the same speech. I feel really strongly that we have more important things to discuss or raise in full council than this. I know and fully expect that councillors will be speaking about shares and how much investment Sunderland has in the airport and lots of lovely facts and figures that will be relevant to this motion of notice, or at least I hope they would have. So I'm going to keep this really simple. What about the cost of rebranding? What about the other 6 local authorities? Will this mean they want their name, or even just the other city, you know, with Durham? Are they going to want their name on it? I watched with interest this story unfold in the Chronicle, and it needs to be asked here tonight. How did all those hundreds upon hundreds of airport staff, including security, flight attendants, cleaners, retail staff, parking personnel, travel agents and many more feel when reading this article? People who have lost their jobs, income, used savings to survive, suffered mental health issues or relationship breakdowns. How do you think they felt seeing that just some of our city council's priorities coming out of a global pandemic and all that goes with that? How do you think they actually feel about this motion of notice? I have personally supported a lot of people in the travel industry through this pandemic, and not one person has ever said to me, "Do you know what will really help me with losing my job? Being furloughed, Karen." Not the money or debt advice, not the confidence to get another job, not the local food bank so I can feed my family, certainly not the counselling and mental health support I should have because I've lost my job, I'm homeschooling, and I'm just basically skint. No, Karen, what would really help me and the hundreds of people in the travel industry who are absolutely on their knees and at breaking point, the only way it would be helpful is if we change the name of Newcastle Airport. This is, at best, ill-timed and at worst a poor attempt at a headline grabber, and boy did it grab the headlines. It was on the radio today, I'm sure you've all heard. It showed some of our city councillors are so out of touch with our residents and made us a laughingstock judged by most of the comments. You have touched on them yourselves. Here are a few comments out of the 2,000 for those who maybe have missed the article. First comment, a daily reminder that whatever life throws at you, it could be worse. You could have been born in Mackham. Get a life, you sad person. Just because your footy team's 3rd level, stop trying to pinch War Airport. Surely on that basis, we can request a name change to Newcastle and Sunderland Airshow then. Makes as much sense. The vast majority of Sunderland people couldn't give a bleep, and I'm being polite, what you call the airport. So we had 2,600,000 reactions on social media, 2,000 comments and 250 shares. What a way to showcase our city. And I'm glad you think, you know, you've got to bring the joke here. This is our city we're talking about. So come on, everyone. Is this really how we want to portray ourselves? What about concentrating on the things that we are doing now or planning? What about debating and supporting the things that really matter to our residents, such as helping our struggling city centre where shops have closed, helping local businesses get back on their feet, cleaning up our streets, tackling road landlords, food poverty, getting vulnerable people help and support, improving digital inclusion and social isolation? Can we not just focus on some real issues? In a time when Councillor Edgewood, lovely first time speaking, was great and very eloquent, well done, but your ward has a food bank that's just opened during the pandemic. Councillor Hodgson, your ward is struggling to get your residents vaccinated.
Councillor Noble, 5 minutes is up, but I will allow you to wind up. All
right, I'll be very quick. I would have thought that your time and effort would be tackling issues at a ward level. Now, I'm not saying in any way, shape or form that we should be not promoting Sunderland and trying to get the best for our city, but what I am saying very loud and clearly is that this is definitely not a priority, or is it worthy of a motion of notice, not when we have increasing mental health problems, employment issues and everything else I have mentioned. So I revert to the role of a councillor. Sure is the evidence that our residents have asked local councillors to represent this as their view at council meetings, or that residents, when asked, have asked you to lead this on campaign. When did you speak of residents on the doorstep? Give us all, Councillor Hodgson, some of your time management skills, because I certainly haven't had time to ask them a question about the Newcastle Airport. So please withdraw this motion of notice with or without the amendment, as this is not what we were elected for. We were elected as a voice for our residents. Withdraw the motion, get residents' views, and if needs be, put it forward again. But either way, just be sensible. Let's get on with making our city vibrant, dynamic and healthy, and stop wasting valuable time of full council debating things which are unachievable. I will end this by trying to be diplomatic and democratic. If we really want to rename the airport, let's use public figure to rename like they did in Liverpool where they said John Lennon Airport, and give the LA7 the opportunity to undergo a public consultation on this matter. Just please remember, everybody, COVID is very much still around. Let's get our priorities right and just not have this motion of notice. Thank you.
Mayor Sunderland,
I think there's been enough discussion on that.
Mayor Sunderland, I'd like to move on right reply.
I'll come into that, Councillor Hodgson. I'm giving you the right to reply.
Thanks. Mayor Sunderland, I really did try to spare the council me coming back up to the mic again. The councillor for St Anne's spoke very grandly about the role of councillors advocating for our communities. I believe in that wholeheartedly, Karen. But where were you when we had our right to ask questions on behalf of residents completely removed for this meeting? Why have I...
Councillor, don't go there again. Do not go there again.
I have been brought here by what has been raised by the councillor. I and many of my colleagues had many points to raise advocating on behalf of our communities on the subject of cleansing, environmental services, council tax, libraries, and I was denied by council officers. And where were the Labour councillors coming to my support?
Councillor Hodgson, I'm getting order for you to continue, but not in the way you're continuing. What you're trying to debate is being debated and you know the answer. So I'm more than happy for you to finish and sum up.
I think I've made my point quite clearly, Mayor Sunderland. Thanks.
Is the new substantive motion agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we ask our two members back in, please?
I heard everyone.
Thank you. We'll now deal with the notice of motion, which is on the subject of back lanes, and I call upon Councillor Mullen to read and move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Council recognises the need to take action to improve the condition of residential back lanes across the city. Back lanes often look untidy and uninviting, as well as attracting fly tipping issues and antisocial behaviour and speeding and parking problems. To improve the state of back lanes for local residents, Council agrees to learn from the Reclaim the Lanes project and undertake the following actions: to launch a public consultation among residents with back lanes to understand their concerns and preferred solutions, and to report back to each area committee; to subsequently identify a number of pilot areas across the city to implement the solutions and ideas identified by residents, and to conduct an audit of how many waste bins and dog bins are currently in the vicinity of residential areas with multiple back lanes.
Councillor Greener, would you like to second the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I would like to second the motion and reserve the right to speak, please.
Thank you. Councillor Mullen, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it very brief since it's our last item, and this is hopefully a motion that, unlike the local airport, does have a lot of relevance to our residents. Certainly it does in my ward, and this motion was born out of a discussion that the West Area Committee recently held about how we tackle litter and fly tipping through enforcement in our back lanes. And whilst the proposals to consider more enforcement officers, more CCTV and so on are welcomed, what struck me was the extent to which we're proposing to do things to our residents rather than to involve them in the decision-making about that. And so this motion is really a plan to involve them in maintaining their back lanes and to find solutions which seem particularly relevant when, given enforcement officers can't work past 8 o'clock, and residents are dumping rubbish themselves, won't be caught on CCTV. It's better, it seems to me, if they're involved in maintaining them and taking responsibility for them. So I think that if residents feel ownership and responsibility for their lanes, it might deal with the problems that we have instead of having to be punitive and to fine them. And I just want to clarify here, because I know Councillor Peter Wood is going to touch on this, that when we refer to the Reclaiming the Lanes work in the motion, we're referring to the research done by Newcastle University, not the previous East Area project, which had either the same or a similar name. So based on this research, what we're asking is for an opportunity for co-design to allow residents to reimagine what their back lanes look like, what they're for, and how they are used, so that they can take ownership for them and to be part of the solution rather than us punishing them. Thank you very much.
I understand the Deputy Leader wishes to move an amendment. Do you wish to read it out, Deputy Leader?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome the motion and would add that I'm pleased to see the acknowledgement of the role of our area committees in delivering neighbourhood priorities. I do wish, though, to add a couple of small amendments. An audit of waste and dog bins is currently taking place across the city, so a slight change to acknowledge this within the motion. I would also propose an additional action to offer support to residents to turn back lanes into usable outdoor space for growing plants and socialising. There are a number of examples across the UK of many such initiatives that we have been extremely successful in enhancing the physical health, mental health and overall well-being of residents. I'm quite sure that the opposition colleagues would welcome such an action added to the motion. With that, Mr Mayor,
Have you got the whole motion? Would you wish to read it
can you
out?
bring it up on the screen?
Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
that's fine. If you'd read the whole motion out.
To support the residents who may look to increase social and environmental benefits with the proposals to turn lanes into usable outdoor space for growing plants and socialising. The Council recognises the need to take action to improve the condition of residential back lanes across the city. Back lanes often look untidy and uninviting, as well as attracting fly tipping issues, antisocial behaviour and speeding and parking problems. To improve the state of back lanes for local residents, Council agrees to learn from the Reclaim the Lanes project and undertake the following actions. To launch a public consultation among the residents with back lanes to understand their concerns and preferred solutions and to report back to the area committee. To subsequently identify a number of pilot areas across the city to implement the solutions and ideas identified by the residents. To support the residents who may look to increase social and environmental benefits with proposals to turn lanes into usable outdoor space for growing plants and socialising. As part of the current citywide audit of waste and dog bins, to review additional need in the vicinity of residential areas with multiple back lanes. The Council recognises the need to take action. Is that the... I've just read that bit, sorry.
I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, with that, Mr Mayor, I'd move the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the Cabinet Secretary is second the amendment.
Can I second the amendment and reserve the right to speak?
Certainly. Deputy Leader, do you wish to speak?
Apologies. Apologies, Mr Mayor, I've read things the wrong way around. I don't know if it's necessary to read what I said again.
Not easy circumstances. you do that, yes.
I welcome this motion and would add that I'm pleased to see that acknowledgement of the role of our area committee in delivering neighbourhood priorities. I do wish to add a couple of small amendments. An audit of waste dog bins is currently taking place across the city, so a slight change to acknowledge this within the motion. So I would also propose an additional action to offer support to residents to turn back lanes into usable outdoor space for growing plants and socialising. There are a number of examples across the UK, so such initiatives that have been extremely successful in enhancing the physical health, mental and overall well-being of residents. I'm quite sure that opposition colleagues would welcome such an action added to the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Right. I understand Councillor Hodson wishes to speak on the motion. Do you wish to speak on the amendment? And then I'll ask if anyone else wishes to speak on it. Councillor Stewart, you reserve the right to speak, I understand.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Sunderland. The officers will be aware I've also lodged an amendment. I think actually the Liberal Democrat Group amendment is still compatible if this amendment is either passed or rejected. So can I get the officers' advice on how it would be best to proceed?
Through you, Mr Mayor, essentially only one amendment can be dealt with at a time. So this amendment would be dealt with and decided upon, and then you could decide, depending upon the outcome, whether you wished to make any further amendments.
Great, thank you. I'll speak very briefly on this one and then hopefully briefly after. Mayor Sunderland, just to say, obviously, you know, I've already touched upon that it was discussed in Scrutiny Coordinating Committee recently and not for the first time. We all know that Central Sunderland, the sort of city wards, Barnes, Millfield, Hendon, St Michael's, they all have a serious problem with back lanes, with fly tipping, with refuse collection. It's a long-standing problem that's been getting worse and worse. I've no objection to the Conservatives' motion, no objection to this Labour amendment. These are all positive, proactive things. The difference I want to move, and I'll come on to, is that I just don't think we need another public consultation, which, you know, could cost £100,000 easy. I think we actually all know, we have done, you know, the Let's Talk consultation. We have done quite a lot of consultation as a council recently at considerable expense. I think we know what the problem is. I think it's a resource issue. We aren't staffing environmental services as well as we should be. It's a far less reactive service than it has been, you know, prior to about 2016, 2017. The Labour group are, I can see, furiously writing notes to say, well, where's the money, Niall? Well, you know, indeed. So I'll get straight onto that as well. You know, I was in the same Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, and I'm looking at John Ritchie here, because I asked, you know, we're building all these new cultural venues in the city, the Culture House and things like that. I work in that field myself, and I know it's very expensive to staff cultural venues. How, you know, where are we bringing forward a resource budget to fund this? And sure enough, we have plans to increase resource funding for culture by £1 million a year. That's to fund staffing of the Culture House. Now, my argument would be, I'm not going to, you know, criticise funding culture in Sunderland, but, you know, when you put this to our residents, then if we've money, if we can summon £1 million a year to pay for staff for the Culture House, how can't we summon money to pay for a more reactive environmental services staffing arrangement? Because I think if we asked our residents, that's what the very challenging question they'd be putting to us. So I will support this amendment, Mayor Sunderland, and I'll move very briefly one after this, which asks to remove the public consultation element, but little else. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment?
Councillor Ty. Councillor Mann. Can I just ask who the councillors at the back? Councillor Hartnack. Leader.
Councillor Wood.
Councillor Wood. So, Mr Mayor, the speakers are councillors Tye, Mann, Hartnack, G Miller, Wood, and Councillor Stewart had reserved the right to speak, and Councillor Mullen has the right of reply.
Councillor Tye.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I will keep this very, very briefly, and I wasn't going to talk until Councillor Hodson did make his comments about resource. And I have to be honest, in Silksworth we predominantly have a mix of council housing, private housing, and we have small pockets of back lanes, and in an area we would call the Newport area. I would say that area, and I've got text messages on my phone and emails I could share with Councillor Hodson, those residents, and what I would describe as residents that have bought their homes and lived in their homes for a significant period of time, their issues don't come down to resource issues. We can spend a significant time, both as volunteers or the council, litter picking that back lane, and 15 minutes after our teams have pulled out, rubbish is tipped there again. And residents in that particular area blame that on private landlords who come, clear the houses, ready for the next tenant, think it's perfectly acceptable to dump that rubbish in the back lane and expect us to pick up that rubbish. As you well know, private landlords have access to a free service where that rubbish can be disposed of, so there's absolutely no excuse. And why I will be supporting this and will be lobbying within my political group and hopefully will get support across the council is, I think we need to start seriously thinking about selective licensing across this whole city and in these back lanes, because predominantly, and I have banged the drum at Area Committee, West Area Committee, it's something I've pushed and tried to have that discussion. It's now time to really make a difference in our back lanes in these areas where private landlords have snapped up these properties. We have to have selective licensing. The volunteer scheme isn't working. We're trying our best, but we can't force those rogue landlords to do the right thing. And I have to be honest, I'm not just saying this, that the residents in these areas in Silksworth that I'm referring to specifically do say that it's the landlorded properties that cause predominantly the issue. So I certainly will be supporting the notice of motion, but I think as well we do have to do that public consultation, Councillor Hodson, as well, because these are the things we need extract out. We need the residents to tell us. Now, I'm not advocating we spend hundreds of thousands of pounds doing that. I think as teams of councillors we can go and do a very short, brief questionnaire in these back lanes and feed it back into Area Committee, whatever that process may be. But I do think it's important. I think you would advocate as well. We should be doing things with our residents and not to them, which is, I think, a comment that you did, Mayor. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mann.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just going to keep this very brief. I wasn't really going to speak to this, but quite happy to support either the substantive or the amended motion. Back lanes, of course, it's across the city all the time. We're really stretched in environmental services, Mr Mayor. We know this. This is a massive problem, similar to the rat problem that we don't have, that I'm just actually dealing with about 5 complaints of great big things running about in broad daylight in Pennywell. So we need money to address that. Back lanes, yes, of course, it's where people fly tip, but in the outlying wards, such as mine, the predominantly Gen 2 housing estates, we don't have the back lanes, but we do have park areas, and we do have, in my ward, we have Riverside at South Hilton, we have fly tipping. So yes, it's about putting more money into environmental services, getting VCS involved more, getting councillors involved more, getting out there and being proud of our neighbourhoods, proud of our communities, helping each other to work together. So yes, I support the motion as it stands either way, but and I have to come to the deputy leader that I love your idea of making back lanes an outdoor space and growing flowers and things, but how are the bin crews going to get down? Thanks very much, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hartnack.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully support the substantive and amended motions, although the flowers idea is a step a little bit too far, I think, certainly for the ward that I represent. But I'd also like to give recognition for the work undertaken by this council's Julia Bentley and Groundworks back in 2019, in Millfield particularly. Since then, however, I think back lanes across the city, and in particular my ward and Fulwell and neighbouring St Peter's, appear to have become far worse in respect of their cleanliness, with instances of fly tipping, dog fouling, and frequent complaints of traders depositing waste in plastic bags, which clearly attracts rats, and we've had complaints of that within the Fulwell ward. Can I also mention as well, and it hasn't been mentioned so far, that charity shops are a big problem, where many fail to effectively lock their commercial bins, and people rummaging through them simply dumping the unwanted contents on the lane for someone else to clear up. And this is another problem which I think is prevailing across the city and again across Fulwell ward. These problems are very real and cause much stress for decent people living and visiting the areas affected. The implementation of this motion, or the amended motion, will have a massive impact on many people across the pilot locations and surely must get cross-party support. Thank you, Mayor.
Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. We should have more of these meetings where all my answers are given to me in the council reports that the Conservative councillors patently failed to even look at. Like we had with Councillor McDonough not noticing the scrutiny report that he'd just approved. Councillor Mullen clearly doesn't seem to have read his West Area Committee report on these issues, and I have to state that I do support the amended motion. Because it just needed those small changes to make it a more and better motion for us to act on. So I'm going to agree with Councillor Hodson. It's a first and it's a shock. Honestly, I'm going to get weak in a second. You're quite right, Councillor Hodson. It is a staffing issue. And we all know, drum roll, that was caused and is caused by 11 years of Tory austerity. You know, initially supported by the Liberal Democrats. Vote yellow, get blue. You know, there's no costs for the Culture House at the moment because it's not built. So we will look at all of that when it's actually up and running in a few years' time. The Let's Talk initiative, Mr Mayor, is already leading on this. The council's been doing an excellent job of engaging with residents, and I fully support the idea of another consultation. Yes, it will cost money, but I think Councillor Mullen's correct to suggest that we do a bit more work in that. So I'm absolutely fine with more talking to residents if it gives us a better answer. But when you look at West Area Committee spending 540,000, East Area Committee spending 930,000, North Area Committee 760,000, the Caulfields 495,000, and Washington 840,000 in the last year and a bit. Our area committee structures are clearly delivering what our residents are asking of us to do, because this Labour group, this Labour council has been listening to them since I became leader in increasing amounts. And we're doing more with residents to give them what they're asking for and of us. Our public space protection order is a prime example of the work the council's been doing, because residents have asked for antisocial behaviour to be stamped down on. This is why we're increasing enforcement, because residents are telling us, Mr Mayor, they want people who will not look after the city the way the majority of us do. They want them punished. So we've increased our enforcement procedure. But at the end of the day, if we need more people, as Councillor Mann pointed out, we need more money. And Mr Ritchie's sitting there knowing full well that in the last 11 years, this council's had 310 million ripped out of its budget by the Tory government. That 310 million pays for an awful lot of dog bins, pays for an awful lot of staff that we've had to lose, that we could have back, delivering better services, not just in the back lanes, everywhere. You know, and this is once again, let's gaslight the audience. Let's get them to focus on over there because there's no problem here. Let's look there. That's the issue. It's the council. No, the issue is the government and its lack of funding of local authorities, which has impacted on all local authorities in England for the last 11 years. And if the government would only look at its finances going into local government, we might get a better outcome here, because at the end of the day, a consultation will tell us what people want, and then we'll have the interesting issue of how we deliver it if we have insufficient funds. So I'll probably just leave it there, Mr. Mayor, because at the end of the day, it can't do us any harm to talk and listen to our residents. I will agree with Councillor Mullen on one thing. We need to be seen to be doing and working more with them than doing things to them, which we have in the past had a habit to do. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, but I do support the amended motion.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment to the leader. I do find it interesting that the more you and your colleagues bang on over the years about austerity, the more seats you and your party lose on councils, not just Sunderland and the North East, but in Parliament too. But that's just an aside. This is a sensible, serious motion, Mr. Mayor, that we're now debating, the sort of thing that we should be discussing as a full council. And the amendment put forward by the Deputy Leader is in similar vein. And just a slight concern, though, which has been referred to by Councillor Mann. I can agree in principle to the idea of reusable outdoor space being used for growing plants and socialising. But we have to recognise that some of these back lanes are in fact the main access to certain streets in our wards and provide through routes as well, regularly used, yes, by refuse vehicles, but also by cars and indeed vehicles. And obviously, whatever we do mustn't get in the way of access. Now, St Michael's, which I represent with Michael Dixon and Lyle Reid, has its share of back lanes, certainly, older houses mainly nearer the city centre part of the ward. And I took another look this morning at the state of the back lanes, bearing in mind that we were having this debate this afternoon. And the back lanes in St Michael's, frankly, are in much better condition than they used to be. Yes, there were some bins left out after yesterday's collection there, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there was some, but not much, rubbish and litter lying. And yes, some would benefit from resurfacing. But they're in better condition than they used to be because of the work and the effort put in by the council, in part, the East Area Committee mainly, through that route, council officers, ward residents and residents' associations, and ward councillors all working together. With groundworks, we had our own Reclaim the Lanes campaign before the pandemic, and that involved a good deal of contact with the residents living there. And the people are responding now positively to the better environment that they're living in. They're helping to keep it that way. They recognise that it affects and improves indeed the quality of their lives. So I think it's worth applying a similar approach to areas of the city which perhaps have not yet benefited from this kind of approach, as this motion, I think, endorses. And I hope, and indeed I think I've got good reason to hope, that everybody will support that this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just keep this brief, really, and just make a few points in relation to this motion and in reference to the detail also from the original motion. Two points, really, with regards to the Conservatives, that it's actually nice to see that they've recognised two important things that this Labour group and through our leader since 2018 I've been pressing for some time. One is the importance of area committees. I've noticed now that they're actually noticing that area committees do exist, and actually they're a great vehicle for achieving local solutions to local problems, of which back lanes is a very good example. And the second thing that they've picked up on, and damn, they're stealing our clothes and I feel a bit naked, but it's called talking and consulting with the public. You bugger help. Sorry, apologies, Mr. Mayor. But it's really quite surprising to see that the Conservatives are now talking about consulting with the public. Something, again, that we've been doing through the Let's Talk initiative, and taking up the point that Councillor Hodgins mentions. I think never assume you know what the public think. The only way you know that is through consulting with them. And if it's an annual consultation exercise or more, that's what we need to do, because we're here to serve them. In relation to the amended motion, just two key points. One is that we needed to amend this to recognise the fact that there's already an audit of waste and dog bins taking place at the moment, and that the motion should reflect that that is the case. And also to add the additional point about being positive about back lanes with regards to socialising and growing plants. And I know there's been a bit of ridicule over that side, but if you actually do some Google research, you'll actually see across the country there's some fine examples of how communities have taken over back lanes and actually made them a real place for individuals to socialise and be proud of. And I think if we can have a few examples of that in this city, that's one good thing that I think we all should support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We may have missed Councillor Spedding indicating, but I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. You may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate that. And yes, I was missed. I do apologise. I didn't raise my hand high enough, but thank you for the opportunity. I mean, having listened to the comments from the various parts of the city, obviously I'm from Shiny Row. Uniquely, for a bit of brevity, there is only one back lane in the city of Sunderland, and you, Mr. Mayor, live 10 yards away from it, which is Penshire Back Lane. I think the problem we have in the Caulfields area is pretty much a different situation to most of the city, in that we have a vast array of unadopted roads. That's a situation that has gone on for years, and is a legacy from the coal board days in terms of how we organise that. We did actually have some schemes in the past where we've encouraged those that live in those particular areas to help and engage in trying to improve their situations. And an example of that was the Square Root Group in New Harrington, where we managed to set a group up of people from the area who then came together as a real community, raised a lot of money in terms of upgrading an unadopted road and actually making a very livable space for themselves. We were able to encourage that through the area committee. We supported that, we drove that, and I think there was another couple of instances across the city. I think the issue that we need to realise in the Caulfield is that we need to have consultation. We certainly need to cover those areas that are currently living next to an unadopted road, which in their understanding is their access to their property. We have, shall we say, a legacy of mining areas in terms of the cottages and the terraces that have been there since, well, for over 100 and odd years in terms of the mining industry. That's where some of the residents don't have a front road, they only have a back lane, and that's the only access they have to the property, and in some cases that's unadopted. And rightly so, they wish to see that situation improved. I support the notice of motion, clearly, but I would emphasise that we need to organise that consultation, because as others have stated, we do have a lot of absent landlords in the area as well, and that also leads to the blight on the area. So we need to address that. And I think this is the ideal opportunity to do that. So I think Mr. John Ritchie has to dig deep into his pockets and support the whole of the amendment across the whole of the city. Thank you.
Councillor Mullen, you have the right of reply.
very quick, Mr. Mayor, given the time. I'm going to defend the Deputy Leader from some of my colleagues, actually, because I quite like the idea of the plants, and I think some strategic hanging baskets would go down quite well in barns. Not only that, but her amendment is much more gentle than her predecessor, who often used to wreck on motions, but hers, as she said, has, I think, added something more to it. It wasn't quite clear from the tone of the leader's comments whether he was in favour or not, so I think he might need to ask himself for permission to write a letter to himself to explain what his opinion is. However, just on a more serious point, I think we have to keep the consultation in. We consult residents a lot. It's why we have quite an overwhelmed PO box. But we're talking about people's houses, not just places close to them. If we start messing around and changing things so close to where people live and we lack their consent to do it, there could be a big public backlash off that. So I think even if it means spending money, it's right to find out what they want and to get their permission to go ahead with changes. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Can we agree the amendment? Agreed. Thank you. Can we have the amendment up on the screen? Council recognises the need to take action to improve conditions of residential back lanes across the city. Back lanes often look untidy and uninviting, as well as attracting fly-tipping issues, antisocial behaviour and speeding and parking problems. To improve the state of back lanes for local residents, Council agrees to learn from the Reclaim the Lanes project and undertake the following action. Do any members wish to comment on that? Any further comments? Oh, sorry, there's some more. To launch a public consultation among residents with back lanes to understand their concerns and preferred solutions, and to report back to each area committee. To subsequently identify a number of pilot areas across the city to implement the solutions and ideas identified by residents. To support residents who may look to increase social and environmental benefits with proposals to turn lanes into usable outdoor space for growing plants and socialising. As part of the current citywide audit of waste and dog bins, and to review additional need in the vicinity of residential areas with multiple back lanes. Is that all of it? I think that's all of it, isn't it? Yep. As I asked before, does anyone wish to comment? Can we agree the motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. I just want to speak briefly to give notice to yourself and the officers that we'll withdraw the additional amendment we were wishing to add to this. I think it suffices to say that our concern is just that public consultation must not be an expensive talking shop. It's something that we wanted to put on record, that we have said that here. What residents are clamouring for is for that financial investment in areas, and I can hear from around the room that there's lots of different problems in different areas. I was actually really struck by what Phil Ty was saying about Silksworth and also about selective licensing. I would certainly think with Liberal Democrat councillors you're pushing against an open door on that. We all agree that that is something the council needs to look very seriously at introducing. Thank you, Mayor Sunderland.
Thank you. Councillor Greener, you didn't put your hand up for the amendment. Do you wish to speak? Yes, yes, certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Wetman. I'm pleased everybody's in agreement with it, which obviously I thought there would be. And so I'm sort of something else that I just thought of while I was sitting. I was really pleased when they brought in the bulky waste collection and it went down to £10. I think it went down from £15 to £10, and I thought it was a really good thing. But then, thinking again, I think most people have one item to be collected, and I think they don't want to pay £10 for one item because they think, oh, I don't get my money's worth, I haven't got 6 items. So I think we need to look into that. And I think in barns, that's one of the big problems, that everybody's got one fridge that they put out. I can't say my area barns is down to landlords. I think it's just that people need to get rid of the fridge or a one item. Could we maybe look into as a one back lane
the people get together and maybe have the bulky collection as the street of the Back Lane together. So that was just something that came into my head while I was sitting. So if I can just add that. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you very much. Right, councillors and officers and staff, can I thank you very much for the way we've conducted this meeting under very difficult circumstances. We'll do that as we finish. The last thing I need to ask, do you agree the motion? Agree. Have a safe journey home and keep safe and look after yourselves. Thank you very much.